Welcome back, and now I will be showing you how to sew the sleeve of the lining to the lining bodice. So the previous video I showed you how to treat the lining at the opening of the sleeve. Once you are done with that, you would want to again make sure that your sleeve is not twisted on the inside, which means, of course, matching up your seams to the lining and matching all your notches. Notches, your front notch, your back notch, your shoulder notch as well. Okay, so I have done just that, and here I have both my sleeve and my bodice together. And all I'm going to do, very simple, so just, pay attention and follow just carefully. And I just pinned it in place so that it does not twist in the process. So what I will do now is just go in between the lining and the jacket shell, and I'm going to grab, hopefully y'all can see this. So I'm in between the lining and the bodice jacket, and I'm going to grab both raw edges of the sleeve and the lining bodice, put right sides together, and then now I'm going to pin all the way around, and that will find and position where I need to pin and then sew. Okay, so I'm going to pin that. And then pin my shoulder notches. And just go around the entire jacket or the entire armhole and pin in place. And this is why, the initial pinning kind of helps prevent that twisting. And once I'm done pinning, I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that would conclude the joining of the armhole. So I'm going to finish pinning this, and then I'll come back and show you how it looks like once it's pinned from the inside and how it looks pinned from the right side of the lining. And I'm going to stitch and show you the finished product. So this is it all pinned up. Of course, it kind of looks a little bit confusing from the inside, but if I bring back my lining this way, you can see how my sleeve will now end up being sewn. Okay, that's the seam area. So the next thing, of course, is just to go in again in between the wrong side of the lining and the jacket and just sew that seam down at a 1/2 inch and press. I'll be right back. Okay, now you can see the sleeve has been completely sewn in. The lining sleeve has been sewn in. Okay, and you can see that you still have the drop from the lining. Okay, just as you pattern. So you should still have a drop in your lining. Now, before you move on to the next thing, just little details that again make huge differences in tailoring. You do want to make a French tack or a thread chain, okay? So you'd go in between the lining, and the shell again. And you want to take note of your seam allowance, okay? So right here, I have the notch that is usually at the center of the armhole, which would be the side seam, okay? And I'm going to match it to the center notch that is on the side panel of your jacket. If you don't have a side panel, then it would be a side seam, okay? If you have a side panel, then there should be a notch where your side seam should naturally be. So all I'm going to do is using a 2-ply thread. Again, make sure you use your magic thread or wax. And I'm going to attach the lining seam allowance to the lining, to the jacket seam allowance. Okay, so I've just gone in, out, and I'm going to make a small loop. What you don't want to do is make it too tight. Okay, so you can see that I've got about a finger spacing in there. Okay, about a finger spacing. Doing this just prevents the lining from twisting around inside the jacket when it's being worn. Okay, so it's a small detail, but a detail that does help with the function of the garment. Okay, so now I've done 2 loops around just attaching the seam allowances, and now the next thing I'm going to do is put my needle under, wrap my thread around, and pull. Pull my thread under, okay, wrap my thread around it and pull. So it's kind of like making, what is it called? A buttonhole, a hand buttonhole stitch. Only this time, instead of doing it on fabric, you are doing it only on the thread, okay? So hopefully you can see it. It's a very small detail, but very helpful with the wearing of the garment. So I just take my needle under and bring it in between the loops, okay? Loop your thread around, needle under, and pull. And that's it, okay? And so that is how you would want to finish your lining sleeve. And then of course lock the stitch. And when you are done pressing, you want to